Hi and welcome back. This is part 2 of a multi-part video I am making in order to show how I handle my no-scale track. In this segment, I'll be showing you how I locate and solder my power drops to the rails, as well as how I locate and attach the joint bars, sometimes commonly referred to as fish plates, to the rails, and last but definitely not least, the actual spiking of the rails. During the spiking portion of the video, I will show you how I locate my rails on the ties, how I spike the rail, both with and without the use of fish plates. For today's project, I will be using two sections of code 148 steel rail, each 36 inches in length, tie plates, joint bars, wire for our power drops, as well as several spikes. The tools you will see me using today are going to be a soldering iron, a Dremel tool equipped with a fiberglass reinforced cutoff wheel, some crazy glue for attaching our joint bars, a screwdriver used for pushing our tie plates into place, spiking pliers, tape measure, a good sharp pencil, as well as an MRA track gauge. We're now ready to begin locating our rails temporarily in order to find a good place to attach our power drops. Now there's two places in which we can attach these. The first being the underside of the rail. It's a good location as it helps to hide the power drop. It's also a great surface to solder to. It's nice and flat. Just be sure to remember that if you're going to use this method, then you'll need to do a few things before you spike the rail down. First is to locate a position for the feeder itself. You need to make sure that this feeder is not going to be in the way of a tie. If this occurs, the rail will not sit flush on the surface of the ties. You're going to have to do one of two things. You're either going to have to come back and move the power drop to a better location, or you're going to have to cut and remove some of the tie that's in the way of that power drop. The second place we can attach our power drops is to the side of the rail. This is the method that I use. It's the one I'll be showing you today. I also like to make sure I solder mine on the opposite side from which the track will be viewed. It helps, as you can imagine, to hide them. Just be sure that if you use that method, that you solder them very low on the rail so that the flanges of the wheels will not hit that solder joint, as this could cause the engine or the car to bounce over it or even derail at that location. Also, you can solder the feeders after the rail is down. Just make sure that if you're using tie plates and joint bars that you solder the feeders on before you get too close to those parts. Those parts are plastic, and if you solder too close to them, as you can imagine, they will melt. So make sure that you have a good spacing between where you're soldering and where your last tie plate or joint bar is. Personally, I like to make sure I'm at least 15 ties away before I begin to solder anything. Okay, now down at track level here, we have our rail in place, roughly where it's going to be positioned. What I want to do now is take that moment to locate a good spot for my power drop. I think I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize this spot right here. As you can see, we want to locate a good area that's going to allow the wire to pass through the surface of our layout without striking any of the ties. So I'm going to use this location right here, and again we'll be soldering right up to the side of the rail. What I did here was I translated that mark I had just made earlier to the opposite side of my rail, which is in this location here. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to be drilling a hole in the surface of the layout right here in which to pass the power drop through. Okay, now we're through. I'm going to clean up that debris and we'll begin soldering the feeder. Okay, I've got my rail basically in position where I need it. What I'd like to do is take a little bit of time. Right here you can see where I've ground the rail and where our hole is drilled through the top of the benchwork. What I like to do is put some heat to the rail initially just to get a little bit of solder on there. Actually help the wire itself solder to the rail just a little bit quicker than normal. At this point I also like to take the wire I'm using and pre-solder that as well, or tin it. So all we'll do is we'll just take our rail, and it's kind of awkward because I'm doing this kind of freehanding it a little bit, if you will, just so you can get a shot in the video here. And again, once you get enough heat into this copper, it'll just wick it right in there. Okay. Now we've got our wire and our track ready to go. What I'm going to do is just put a little bend in the wire to hopefully hold it in the general location I'm going to need it in when I am soldering it, so it doesn't push through all the way through my bench work. And we'll take it and we will feed it in through the hole we drilled already. Just kind of get it down roughly into the position we need it. I like to put a little bit of a bend into the wire itself. Again, this all just helps hold everything in one nice location when we're getting ready to solder our feeder over here, our power drop to the rail. Again, I've just got the rail kind of held in place temporarily by utilizing these T-pins right here. I'm pretty happy with where that's at. What I'm going to do now is come back, put some heat to both the rail and that feeder. Take just a moment to get everything heated back up. And again, you know what, when I do my scenery work, you might be seeing this feeder in the video thinking it's just enormous. But the fact is once I do the scenery work and I weather these rails and paint everything up and such, you'll be hard pressed to find this. Okay. Applied the heat. I'm just going to use my screwdriver to hold the wire in place while I remove the heat. Give it a few seconds to cool. We should have a good solid connection. I'll just check it by grabbing the wire from underneath. It's a very good connection we have there. So now we've got our feeder soldered to the side of our rail. We're now ready to attach our joint bars. When jointed rail was still in use, they would use these joint bars to attach one section of rail to the next. One was placed on either side of the rail, and then both halves would then be bolted together. On mainline track, typically you'd see a 6-bolt joint bar, while in the yards, sidings, and engine servicing facilities, a 4-bolt type would usually be found. The 6-bolt used on the main was needed as the forces and stresses were much higher. You could use the joint bars that I have here in front of us and simply cut off about a third of it, and what that'll do is that'll leave you with a 4-bolt joint bar. Again, that would be ideal for use in yards and sidings and so forth. These kind I have here are intended to be glued on. However, you may simply hold them in position and attach them with spikes. However, I found this to be a really difficult process, so I prefer to use glue. The sections of rail back in the day when they were being utilized were 39 feet in length, and that translates to 9 3/4 of an inch in our scale. So when I place these, I like to make sure that I keep that spacing between them. Also, a point worth noting is that the joints were often placed directly over a tie. Doing this ensured that both rail ends were supported by the tie as well as just the whole joint overall. Again, that was the usual practice, but I've actually found plenty of photos that show that that practice wasn't always followed. So you can vary on that a little bit. Another thing to remember when attaching these is that the joints also would be staggered from one rail to the opposite rail on the other side here. You would not see one joint directly across from another. They would stagger those also to generally increase the ride quality for the passenger traffic and just to spread the joints out so they were not, again, directly across from one another, creating an inherent weak point in the track work. Okay, we're ready to begin attaching the joint bars to the rail. As you can see down here at the end of the rail, I know I'm going to have a joint bar in this location when I connect my opposite rail to this section. So what I want to do, again, like I said, is measure down 9 3/4 of an inch from this location. As you can see, I've got my tape measure basically at 9 3/4 of an inch. Now, as you come down the track, or down the rail rather, we come down to a point where the end of the tape measure is right in this location here. Now, as you can see, I placed a mark approximately where I want to glue the joint bar. Okay, again, I told you these usually would fall over the tops of the ties. Not always, especially in yard applications. So what I want to do is I want to come in here. I like to just put a little dab of glue, just a little drop there, just enough to hold the joint bar in position. I've cut some of them down to the 4-bolt size. I'm going to come in again. Pardon my fingers here. I'm going to come in and just place that into the glue. Okay, and that's going to hold it in place perfectly until we're ready to come along and insert a spike in this location. I'm going to go ahead and continue this process again, measuring off from the center of my joint bar right here. I'm going to measure down again 9 3/4 inches. I'm going to apply the rest of these to both sides of the rail, and when we come back, we will begin the spiking process. Okay, now to begin with the actual spiking of the rail. As you can see here, I've repositioned my rail back into place. We've got our joint bars all glued on. We've got our power drop soldered on securely. Temporarily using these T-pins just to basically hold the rail in the general area I want it in relation to the edge of the ties. When it comes to this part of the process, I just like to eyeball it. I'm not too terribly concerned with getting it exact, spot on, perfect. So again, I just eyeball this distance from the rail to the edge of these ties. To begin, I like to work one rail at a time, and I will be using an NMRA track gauge today. They do have 3-point track gauges that can be used as well. I don't use them. I prefer to do it this way. Again, use whichever method suits you, whichever you feel more comfortable with, and whatever you enjoy more. To begin with, I'm going to insert a tie plate down at this end of the rail. I don't want to put it right on the very end of this rail just yet, because I want to have room to slip on my joint bars later when I connect my next section of rail, continuing in the opposite direction. So what I think I'll do is I'll start right here on this tie, just adjacent to this T-pin. And all I like to do is just to set it down on top of the tie. And when you're working with these, they're extremely light, so it's definitely possible, these things are going to fly on you. I will just actually lift the rail up ever so slightly, slide a tie plate into the general area, push it down, and then it'll kind of sink itself into place. If you recall in an earlier video, I had showed you how these tie plates have these little ridges on them. Okay, and those little ridges actually help the tie plate to index itself on the base of the rail. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to place a few more, and I'll begin driving the spikes. And again, same thing. Just lift the rail up ever so slightly, insert your tie plate, get it into position, and continue the process. I generally like to put in, 3 or 4 tie plates. And then I'll spike the first rail down here, and just to get things, just to start getting things held down. Not a very complicated process, as you can see. A bit tedious, absolutely. But you know what? It's a detail that I want to incorporate. And again, you do not have to incorporate the extra details that I'm showing here. It's just what I like to do, what I like to use, and it works for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and load up a spike, get it into my spiking pliers. I'm going to come down. I'm going to press down on the rail just to hold things in position while I drive this first spike in. When you're driving these spikes in, you do not want to hold your spiking pliers directly at a 12 o'clock position. If you do this, what's going to happen is the spike is going to actually strike the top of the rail head, okay, and it's not going to sink properly. So I like to hold off at about a 1 o'clock or an 11 o'clock position. We're going to drive the spike in just till those spiking pliers bottom out on top of the rail there. And if you notice, what that's going to do is it's going to actually leave our spike protruding by about 1/3 or 1/4 of its length. I'm going to do the opposite side now. Again, the same process. Just get a spike into my pliers. and we'll get ready to insert this spike. Now we want to make sure that we offset the spikes. Okay. Let me drive this in here. Reason for that is if we take our spikes and we put them in directly across from one another, when we insert those, they're going to hit each other possibly and not want to go in all the way. By offsetting them, that'll allow the spikes to be driven in and to miss each other. Okay, now I've got both my spikes in. I go ahead and just gently drive the spike home. And as you can see there, what we're looking for is to have it just make a good solid contact with the base of the rail. Okay? We're not trying to drive these through the floor. And if you push too hard during this step, what could actually happen is you could actually take the spike and push it beneath the rail. And what's going to happen there is it's going to become a mess. You're going to have to stop, remove your rail, pull the spikes and everything out and so forth. I've got one spike in. I'm going to go ahead and do the next tie now. And we're just going to continue the same process here. Very simple, nothing too complicated. Again, I'm going to apply my pressure, hold off at that angle, and insert my spike just till it bottoms out. I'm going to come back, do the opposite side, and we just keep repeating this process down for a portion of the rail. And again, gently drive it home and do the opposite side of the rail. Okay. And we're going to continue that on down the line. Okay, we're back, and as you can see, I've got my opposite rail just loosely in position right now. I've gone and inserted just a couple of tie plates underneath the base of the rail, exactly in the same process as we did on the other side here. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to take my track gauge after I actually get my spiking pliers loaded up with a spike. What I like to do is just kind of be ready to go with the spike here. Okay, got my spiking pliers in my hand, same thing as my track gauge. What I want to do is, on this NMRA track gauge, at the base here, these little tabs you see, these are going to be what we're using in order to get our gauge of our track. I like to take the one side of it, place it up against the rail that I've already spiked in place, because I know that's not going to go anywhere. Then I'll come back in, grab the opposite rail, just nudge it into position. That's pretty good right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some downward pressure. Insert my spike first on the inside tie plate, on the inside of the rail rather. At least that way I know that that gauge will not move inward on me, even if this rail does when I reload for my second spike. Grab another spike, load my pliers up, same thing. I'm going to apply a little bit of downward pressure, insert my spike. Even if things move just a little bit on you, that's okay. You know, everything is still loose. This is the only thing holding this particular rail in at this point. Again, we're going to do the same thing. Gentle pressure. Rail moved just a little bit, but you know what? That's okay. Now when I drive the other one in, if you notice, it kind of pushed it back to where it was. I'm just going to go ahead, check my gauge again, see if everything's okay. Alright. It's a little large, a little open on the gauge. What I want to do, I'll take my old screwdriver at the base of the rail here, and I'll just give it just a little push inward ever so snugly. Put a little more pressure back on that spike. Check it again here. Okay, I've still got a little bit of side play, slightly less than I had earlier, but I'm okay with this. The reason is, this particular track we're working on here, I'll show you at the end of the video, this is actually going to be a staging track at a coaling facility. Not mainline track. So I'm okay with it being just slightly out of gauge, slightly open, if you will. I'm not concerned about that. It's a very small amount. Now, as you can see with our one spike, or one tie rather, spiked, holding our opposite rail in place, what I'll do at this point is I'll insert a couple of additional tie plates. Again, in the same way as I did on the opposite side. Just want to kind of get these in a general position. Using my screwdriver here to push these under. I've got some pretty large fingers like most of us do, and I've just found that utilizing this screwdriver just kind of speeds things up. Get everything into position, get slide our tie plates under. Okay, we've got that in place. Again, it's all loose and it's fine. Okay, what I want to do again, get my next spike ready to go, load up my pliers, I grab my track gauge, I come back to it. I'm going to check this next tie here. Again, things are opened up a little bit, so at this point I'll try to draw it inward just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and nudge my tie plate into place. Get my spike ready to go here, make sure it's facing the correct angle. Again, holding off that slight angle, we'll drive it in again just till it bottoms out. Grab our next spike and repeat the process on the opposite side. And this is all there is to it. Not much to handling this track. It's not, there's not some kind of big mystique around it. It's fairly easy. Once you get going and just kind of find your rhythm, so we've all got our own style, our own way of doing this. And like I said, this is just my way of doing these various steps that you're seeing here. This by no means is, like I said, the definitive guide, the bottom line on how to do all of this. Check my gauge again. Again, I got just a little side plate. I'm okay with it. Okay, like I said, this is going to be a staging track. I'm not terribly concerned about it. So there you go. You've seen how we've positioned our rail, marked it to attach our power feeds, the soldering of one. Again, that process is the same everywhere you go. You see me position the rail, mark the locations for the joint bars, us position the tie plates, and get on with the spiking. And now again, if you're not utilizing tie plates, this process is the same. Your rail's going to be right resting on the surface of your ties. And if you want to spike every tie you can, I've seen some spike every third or every fourth tie and hold the rail directly down to the ties. And that's more than adequate. It's just fine. And you know what? Once you get the track weathered and all the scenery in and everything, it comes out looking really, really good. Again, utilizing all these detail parts, that's just my personal preference. It's how I like to do things. It's the process that I enjoy. And again, you don't have to utilize these parts. But we would just be continuing on the same process here. Okay, I'd drive some spikes into my next tie here. I would leave this fourth one unspiked until I inserted a couple of more tie plates further down the track. Reason for that is if you were to spike this one right here without having another tie plate inserted already, you're going to be hard pressed to push that tie plate underneath this rail. Okay, and with these being plastic, they will damage very, very easily. Okay, so again, do yourself a favor, stop one or two ties ahead, if you will, and insert a few more tie plates down as you go. Like I said, this is just my steps, the way I do things. Again, find out what works well for you and do what makes you happy. I hope you enjoyed the video. Later on in upcoming videos, I'll be showing you how I handle my curved track, as well as building some turnouts and some of the wiring steps I'm taking. So again, I hope you enjoyed it. What I'm going to do here is just kind of remove the camera for a second so you can come down to track level. Get a little view as to what we were working on here. Give me just one moment. Now as we come down and we take a look, here's what we've done. Okay, we've got the rail spiked into place, utilizing our tie plates. And in actuality, I'll just give you a little bit of a overview of the entire area right in here. This again is going to be, like I said, a track into a staging track facility, coaling facility rather, pardon me. So that's it. This is the whole area that I've been working on. And just as a point of fact, I do have some track work down here that I did spike without tie plates. That would be right in this area here. Reason I'm doing that very quickly is because with any type of coaling facility, as you can imagine, these tracks are going to load up with coal dust, coal that is spilled, and so forth. And oftentimes that would come right up to the top of the railheads, all that debris. So if I were to use 4 spikes in every tie and incorporate the tie plates and everything, you would just lose all that detail because it would get covered up. So down here, that's why I'm going this route. Got enough spikes in place to hold my rail, and I'm not wasting the tie plates or the extra time. As I said, I'm just going to cover it all up anyway. So I hope you enjoyed it. As I come back along here, kind of get a look at the joint bars we incorporated. And that's it. Thanks for watching.